bags, settling down, and then moving off again. My parents actually split up when I was about 8 years old, and my mum was from Manchester, so myself and my sisters went with her back to Manchester. In the days of old, to get a house, get on into the council, you had to be on the list. So I ended up in a homeless home in Moss Side in Manchester, which back in the 80s was probably the roughest state in the UK. So it wasn't long before I was using my fists in the playground and sort of toughening up myself. My dad got custody of myself and my sisters about 2 years later, and we moved back down to Aldershot, which at the time, late 80s, was the home of the British Army, where I went to school. In Wavell in North Cam was where the balloon is, where the paras jump out. You've got the Red Devils taking off from the playing field. You're very immersed in that environment. Everyone was walking around in green kit, but it wasn't, something I'd aspired to be. I didn't really look at the military as a career for myself. I actually always wanted to be a fireman. But when I left school in '93, again, there was a big recession back then. There was a lot of job applications for the one role. So I approached my father and I thought, well, why not join the military, get some experience and discipline that'll help boost up the CV, and then apply in 3 years' time. And so I told my dad my intentions, but rather than those warm, comforting words, yeah, I'll help you, and he told me I'd last 2 minutes. I was about 9.5 stone and 5'7" at the time, so I could probably see where he was coming from. But for me, I didn't see that as a hurdle. I just saw that as a challenge. And I went to the careers office, signed up for the Royal Engineers. And then obviously, as I was then going through the process, went through training, I could see my father's attitude changing. It almost did a 180. You could see it wasn't a throwaway comment from me, and it was actually something I wanted to pursue. Like I said, I thought, well, I'll do 3 years, get a trade from the Royal Engineers and then leave. But that wasn't the case. I actually, when I joined the military, I felt very comfortable in that environment. I felt like I had a new family, and it just went on year after year after year.
Well, that's quite because I was reading your book, great book, Relentless, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. You joined the army, you wanted to become a paratrooper, which is kind of understandable because everyone wants to become a para as a kid. You've been brought up in Aldershot, and so you've sort of seen all of that. You've had the Moss Side, so you've got the fighting in your spirit, I suppose, at that point. You've gone to Aldershot and probably honed your skills in the Pegasus or whatever pub you were going into underage. And then you joined the engineers, and you where did you do your training there? Was that Bassingbourn?
It was Bassingbourn back in them days, yeah.
Yeah. So what year was that?
So that was 95. So
okay.
February 95, yeah.
Out of interest, what troop? You don't suppose you remember what troop you were on, do you?
I don't know what. No, I don't remember what troop actually. No, I don't. But going back to your comment about the paras, in them days, when you walked into the careers office, you tend to walk out joining the unit or whoever you've just spoken to. But obviously in Aldershot, back in them days, I'd never even heard of the Royal Marines or the SPS. There was no way there was going to be a Royal Marines careers office in the centre of Aldershot. So I did. I came out and I'd signed up for the paras. And I walked. My father's office was only about 200 metres from the careers office at the time. So I walked in. I said, "Yeah, I've signed up for the army." So what are you joining? I said, "The paras." He said, "You're bloody not." And he marched me straight back in. But my old man at the time, he was a sergeant major at Gib Barracks, which is a training establishment around the corner. But he was also the Army football manager, player and coach. So his career was very much focused around his sporting abilities. So I didn't really know about 5-9 Commando, 9 Para Squadron, all these other options. So my father made sure I signed up for the Royal Engineers, and then sat me down and explained about these other units. I then went back in a couple of weeks later and had to do like a touchscreen test to test your mental ability. Then I passed all that, and I got told I could choose any trade I want. So, I was thinking more between what was hanging between my legs than in my head. And I thought, well, bomb disposal sounds sexy. So I signed up for EOD, and my dad again marched me straight back in. So he was almost like, he was very much, steering the direction where I should go. He was looking more long-term rather than short-term.
Good advice.
Yeah, great advice.
I went straight down and I was like, I'm going to become Royal Marines Commando. And they said, yeah, you can become a commando, but there's like a 6-month waiting list to go to Limpston and do your potential recruits course, whatever they called it back in the day. And I thought, 6 months? Oh, no, I want to be like, running around and putting the green kit on. So I went down and said, I'll join the engineers. And they're like, yeah, that's like a 4-month wait. And I'm like, oh, 4 months. I'll join the infantry. And they said, mate, don't join the infantry. Get like a second sort of career in. You need a skill set for when you get out, because the first thing you can do, the minute you join, think about what you can do when you leave. Don't think about that journey in between. So I think to anyone who is joining, just get a trade, or it's the most important advice I could give. But then you've gone on like a really strange journey. So you go from Basingbourne, and for anyone who wants to know what that place is like, watch Full Metal Jacket, because that's where they filmed that back in whenever it was, late 80s. Great film.
Yeah.
And but then you decided you've gone 5-9 Commando, right?
Yeah, well, prior to that, actually, my first posting was 2-8 Engineer Regiment. Because of my dad's reputation within the Army football, they were like, you're Stott's lad. So they flew me. I went straight out to Germany because they were the Army football champions themselves. So as soon as I landed, my troop staff sergeant was like, well, I'm never going to see you again because you're a kiss baller. So you go work in the gym. So I ended up being a PTI. And then, for me, young 18-year-old lad in Germany, I'm glad I actually went over there to experience it. But after a few months, you can almost see that my career was mirroring my father's. And I didn't want that. I wanted to carve my own path. So I applied for the All Arms Commando course, and then went back to North Devon and did the beat up there and the All Arms.
So what was that like, the Commando course?
Yeah, well, I ended up, from my Commando course, about 3.5 years later, I was an instructor on the Commando course. But when you're a young lad at 18, you still haven't fully developed. Your body's still growing. So I remember some of the hardest, people say, well, the hardest thing you've done in military, some of the weighted carries on the All Arms Commando course, I really found difficult. But that's just because I hadn't developed as an individual. So, the All Arms Commando course is tested. But then, you then join your unit, join 5-9, and then you learn those other skill sets. I mean, 3 years later, you're a fully developed man. You go back and you're like, I don't know what the problem was, but everyone's at different stages in their careers on that course. You've got everything from senior NCOs, officers to young guys that have just come straight out of basic training. But it's a great course, and the difference from when I did my course to when I went back as an instructor was night and day. When I did my course, I could quite happily say I didn't learn anything. It was just about how fit you are. They wouldn't even let us wear our Gore-Tex. It wasn't a course that I learned anything on. I learned all that when I joined the unit, but when I went back, it was all about, yes, you still got to reach those commando tests, physical bits, but you need to teach them, they need to learn. So that was quite good to see.
I was talking to a guy the other day, and he'd done the commando course, I'd done P Company, and we were having this whole debate about what's harder, the typical who's got a bigger cock. And I think that what we came out of it is that the better looking blokes and the soldiers go commando, and the guys who just basically want to scrap, and they're absolutely like speed demons and just want to sort of get thrashed, go P Company. But you learn a lot more soldiering on the commando course, but that's probably because it is also a lot longer course compared to the 4 weeks of Paris.
It is, yeah. I remember going on the recruitment team for 5-9. We used to go to Gibraltar barracks, these training establishments, and it was a bloody nightmare when you're competing with P Company, because you're basically there to the potential students. You say, right, you come to us, you've got a 4-week beat up, which is that's hard enough in itself. The beat ups are pre-course before the All Arms Commando course, and that gets you into a good position for the course. So you've got 4 weeks there. You've then got a 10-week commando course. You're going to be operating in the field, you're going to be soldiering, you're going to be cold, you're going to be wet, and you don't get any additional pay at the end of it. And then P Company lads would come in and be like, right, 4-week course, get thrashed around, that's it, and you get para pay at the end. You're like, how do you compete with that? So for a lot of our students, it was either something they wanted or always aspired to be. But if you were a neutral and you didn't know where you were going, you could quite easily see why everyone went the 9 Squadron way.
4 weeks of hard work and money.
Exactly. Get cold or wet and get nothing.
But that took you sort of then. Did you go? Then you came back and sort of reading your book. You sort of did 5-9. Then you went on to Kosovo. You did OPAC Cola.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was it. Yeah. So I went 5'9", and then I wasn't long then selected to join Recce Troop within 5'9". So 5'9" Recce Troop, we're part of the Brigade Recce Force, the Free Commander Brigade. So we work alongside Brigade Patrol Troop from the Royal Marines, which is your mountain leaders and your snipers, and 148 Forward Operating Battery from the artillery. So it's almost like their own unique troop. So we very much separate from the rest of the squadron. So the 5'9" were on tour in Bosnia, and Brigade Recce, we went to Kosovo. And at the time, it was the first operational tour for Recce Troops since the Falklands. So that whole period there, is quite a big time, for 18 years.
It was that 99, was it?
It was 99, yeah.
Yeah, we were on P Company at the time. It was April, and guys were getting pulled off to get taken out to Kosovo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, talking to a few of them. Unfortunately, I want one of them because I'd much rather have been there than getting thrashed. But the blokes were saying it was a hell of a tour. When they went in, some of the stuff they were seeing, and it was stuff they'd done previous to that.
It was great. It was a great tour, but also, up until then, the last sort of operationals that the Green Army would have seen would have been the Gulf War in 91. There was that lull. We had Northern Ireland and things like that. So for UK forces, everyone was so excited that, right, we're actually putting our training into action here. And so Kosovo was great. And, for us as well, being Arctic trained, we were there over the winter as well. So working in the snow in OPs as well. So literally putting everything that we trained to do into practice.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the only countries in recent years, all these conflicts we've gone on, that's turned into a bit of a success story. Croatia and all the surrounding countries now are beautiful places. Yeah,
beautiful places. Yeah, I say, and everyone, we talk to likes of Afghanistan and Iraq. They're all beautiful places. It's just what you see on the TV. You don't see what we're seeing on the ground as well.
So true. Well, yeah, it's just that little sort of snapshot that the media want to proceed and give us. But so you came back from there and you did a few other things, and then I suppose, was this a bit of a turning point in your career? Because originally you only wanted to do 3 years, and then by this point you've been in for longer than that. Yeah,
I think the commando course itself was my turning point quite early. Although I did have a little glitch before that between Germany and 5'9". I spent a period of time, 56 days in Her Majesty's Colchester prison. So, I remember my father saying, "That's it, your career's all messed up." I did it when I was young. I learned from it. Just got into trouble fighting, and but from when I came out of there and went to 5'9", I remember seeing the admin officer, and he just ripped up my report from Colchester Prison, said "new start." So that for me was my start point, my baseline for my career in the army. But I was very fortunate at 5'9". Normally you do a tour there, but going from 5'9" to Recce Troop was actually classed as a posting. So I've almost then started my time at 5'9" again. And then we used to always send an instructor on the All Arms course, which was also classed as a posting, although you're still attached to the unit. So I did a year there, then came back to 5'9" Recce. So in the end, I did 8 years. I went from sapper to sergeant in Recce Troop, which was unheard of.
That's quick.
It was unheard of. And I remember my sergeant major said, "Right, you need to leave, to be able to progress in your career." And that afternoon, actually, I then got a phone call from from Glasgow Manning and Records saying, "You're going down to the Defence Diving School as a senior diving instructor." So that was the end of my time in 5'9", and then went to the dive school.
And you're into that?
Sorry?
Diving was your thing? You're into that, or was it something they sort of sprung on you?
It was something I'd never done before I joined the military. Like skiing. I'd never done skiing before. I went to Norway, did my Arctic warfare training. A year later, I'm out in Rjukan doing a military ski instructor's course. And it was a bit like the diving. The diving was classed as an additional qualification, so you can get a little bit of extra money. So again, I'd never dived pre-military. I then did my dive course, did my basic course, my advanced course, and then did my diving supervisor's course. And that's a course which is very much underestimated. We know about the All Arms Commander course, we know about P Company, we know about selection. Probably one of my hardest courses was my Army diving course. There's been issues with guys that have died doing phys on that course. But it's a great course, and it's not for everyone. it's an alien environment being underwater, you know, especially if you've got nil visibility. But that then put me in good stead going forward to the SBS, because that was where I was most comfortable. As a young child, I enjoyed surfing. I enjoyed diving. You know, I'm very comfortable in that environment, whereas others may find it a bit difficult.
Yeah, I think it takes a certain man, doesn't it, who's comfortable in the water. Speaking to the guy we were talking about just now, you know, when he said some of the stories about these rebreathers and all that sort of stuff he used, I mean, it just gives you claustrophobia. Think about that, you know. Much rather jumping out of a plane or running through the desert than sitting under the water.
Well, diving, when I did my dive course, and I speak to some of the guys now at a dive school, so because health and safety is now taken over. When I did my basic dive course back in the day, there was the only way of communication, you had a lifeline, which is a bit of rope cordage around your chest with a bow line, and then that was to the guy on the top. I mean, you would do what was pulls and bells, which is like succession of pulls and bells, and that's how you communicate. But when you're in the water, you're like, because of the tide, you wonder whether it was that. Or you spend half your time doing your pulls and bells, and that was the old school, you know, nil vis, and you just basically got told on surface what to do, and you went down and did it. Nowadays, because of obviously there's been a few deaths and things like that, you can't go in the water unless you've got two-way voice communications and you've got, you know, cameras. It's, you know, it's very much gone health and safety wise.
It has, but I was talking to somebody a while back, and he said it's great having all this technology and all this health and safety and everything in place, but the problem is that we're losing that skill set where we're learning the basic skills. So when something goes wrong, we haven't got that reliance and that ability just to go back to the old, you know, what you talk about then about ropes, or what is your fallback option there? Because you think, two-way radio's gone, and I suppose you just have to surface. And that's
the problem. When you've got too much kit, the potential to have too many problems. And if you can't dive because you haven't got voice, then, you know, I mean, what is the fallback? Yeah. You know, there should be a bit of common sense in there as well.
It should be. And so at this point, I suppose that, I mean, you've really set yourself up, haven't you? You've sort of ticked off all the boxes, and you think, I suppose, going SF is the natural next thing to do.
Yeah, well, that was it. And obviously, when I was at the dive school, you know, I put in for selection. You know, prior to that, you know, the normal transition for Army was the SAS. But the SBS had now opened the doors tri-service, and they were losing Marines to the SAS because some of the Marines didn't like diving, as we just touched on. So they didn't want to do the diving, so they went SAS. So the SBS had to look at in front of them and say, right, well, we need to be pulling in potential recruits from other units. So they opened up tri-service, and as I said, with my background, you know, my mindset was actually, well, because of my diving experience, if I go SAS, I'm going to end up in boat troop. But if I go SBS, they're all divers, you know, I mean, and I'll fit, you know, we're all at a level playing field. So that was where my mindset was at the time. So much to the disgust of my friends up the road at Hereford, I put in for the SBS, and 6 months later was successful on that course, me and one of my other friends, and we became one of the first Army guys to go SBS, not SAS, which then sort of changed a little bit of a shift, especially where we'd come from, especially like 5'9" record. We had a 100% pass rate on selection. So if one of the key guys was going SBS, you know, the alarm bells were ringing at Hereford. And I think now, you know, 15% of the SBS come from the Army. So it's almost opened those floodgates. So yeah, it was good.
How did you find the course in general?
Yeah, the course. I went on selection in 2003, and I got injured on the hills. So obviously from that, I had a knee operation. So I made sure my training was different. I was at the dive school. I was running courses, so I didn't get an opportunity to go out on the hills. So all my training consisted of was 2 hours on a spin bike in the evening with Bergen on my back. But strange enough, that spin bike, 6 weeks of that, I did my fastest BFT at the age of 28. You know, I mean, I was sort of developing, which caught me out. But you know stories of selection from your friends that have been before. You have an idea of what it's about. But going Poole and not Hereford, you know, they say be the grey man. I was the grey man for about 10 minutes. As soon as I got there, the lads stopped. They just shouted my name out, and it was like, why are you going why are you going to Hereford and not Poole? And I was like, you know, because I like diving. And I was like, shit answer, you know, grab a rock. So on the hills phase, I remember going up, and there was a couple of DS. I won't give out any names, but they were X59, and one is also X9 squadron, and they're like, why are you going, Paul? Gave him that answer. Nah, pick up a rock. So I had to pick up an additional rock, throw it in the Bergen, and then, take a photo of it. They'd take a photo at the end to make sure they weighed the Bergen, make sure it was all in. So this went on for about 2 weeks. Every time I got to their checkpoint, I picked up a weight. So I was like, I'm not having this. So I went away that weekend, the weekend off, and I just went online, Google, Bournemouth Beach heat wave, and there's like double page spread from the Sun newspaper, like topless women. So I just printed that off, laminated it, and stuck it in my other map pocket. So then on the Monday, I got up to the checkpoint, same procedure, DS, like, right, why are you going, Paul, not Hereford? And I put the weapon on my feet, kept it dry, and I pulled this out, and there's a picture. I said, because that's not in Hereford. And they both laughed. They just said, yeah, good answer. And I didn't have to pick up a rock from then on. But what I made sure is that every time, even through the jungle, every hours, I had that in my pocket just in case. And that's what they're doing. They're looking for characters as well. You need to have a sense of humor as well. Don't take things too personally.
Exactly. Yeah, very true. So you had that rock up and down Vidar Valley a few times.
Oh yeah,
how long? So you finish, because I suppose the traditional route that most people know about, you finish a selection, you become a badge member of 2-2, but that's not really where the journey ends when you go in SB, because you've got to go off and play in your boats and do sort of the continuation.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so you think 6 months and you go join your unit, that's it, all singing and dancing. Is that right? There's a blue tracksuit, and you've got another 3 months training. So you do your SF boat course, and then your dive course as well. So that's another three months training before you then finally go join your Sabre squadrons.
So if you had have failed the boat course, I suppose you revert to being a badge member of 2-2? I
think that's what the score was in days of old, but I didn't really know anyone who failed their boat course. I think it was more the dive course, but I think sort of the approach had changed when I got there, because there was actually some guys who couldn't dive anyway. And there was again, not to give names, a friend of mine had a head injury through playing rugby, so he can't dive. So there's no point in sending him to Hereford, because he's still a great operator. He just can't do that one insertion skill, so he'll then do something else. So yeah, they're a bit more grown up about it.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to touch too much more on the SF side because of the usual sort of restrictions, but got some good ops in, bit of door kicking.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I was lucky that we joined in the height of the war on terror. I was very fortunate to do the first ever operational jump for Paul, did numerous operational jumps, dives. I was literally ticking all the boxes, and so for me it was a great time to join. Even speaking to some of my friends who are still in now, they still reflect on that era. It's changed a lot since then, and so I'm very fortunate that I experienced that.
Yeah, a lot of the guys that you speak to now are in. I mean, they're going out to have a few jollies still and everything, but I think that probably 05, 06 when the real shooting sort of all started in Afghan through to probably 2012. I mean, what a period. There was some great ops on there.
Yeah, it was some great ops. Yeah, and then obviously, unfortunately, I got injured in 2010.
Was that the parachuting incident?
That's the parachuting accident. Yeah, so we're on a pre-deployment training to go. We'll literally go back out Afghan in 2 weeks' time. So we're out in Oman doing PDT, and we're already hey-ho jumped anyway, and trained anyway from the previous tours. And Sam A was like, well, just go up, do some fun jumps. And there's no such thing as fun jumps when you're in the military. So I think it was like the third, fourth jump of the day, just a routine jump, exit the aircraft. Normally I like to be number one, and I like to frog it. And I remember my TSM like, right, you get in the middle. So I got in the middle of the stick, and as I exit the aircraft, my leg got just caught up in the line above my head. And unlike Halo, where you're free falling, you're clear of lines, this is a static line still attached to the aircraft. So my leg got caught up in the line, so I'm trying to kick it out in time before the parachute opens. Couldn't kick it out in time. Leg gets pulled up over my head and to the right, and straight away, thankfully my leg did release, but straight away, that instant pain, that sick feeling, I knew I'd done some serious damage. So I was throwing up because of the pain. And at 15,000 feet on a hey-ho, you're on the limits of oxygen at that point as you're descending. So I'm drifted in and out of consciousness, trying to stay with the rest of the team who were unaware that there's actually a situation here. So my first concern was, how was I going to land it? Because you've got one bad leg and you've got one good leg. If you mess up the landing, risk of damaging the good leg. But so I just hovered around the DZ, saw the approaches of the other parachutists, see who did well and who didn't, and then just followed that same line. I landed it one-legged. It was a great landing, but unfortunately the damage sustained had ended short in my career. So I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus, my hamstring, my calf, and my quad as well. So
you're going to do it.
Years, eh?
You're going to do it.
Oh yeah, do it in style. If you're go in style.
What were you jumping, squares or rounds on that?
Yeah, no, squares, BT8. Yeah.
Now that's horrendous. And I suppose, because what's it, you're doing a minute of free fall and then you probably got another 2-3 minutes under the canopy. So it must have been agonizing when you're sort of...
on the hay-ho. So as soon as you exit, it opens. So you can have up to 30 minutes under the canopy because you're traveling up to 50 kilometers. So it's a method of insertion. So yeah, we had even longer in the air, which gave me time to sort of analyze everything, really. You know, I knew that I wasn't going on that tour. I knew before it even landed. So.
Yeah. And what was the recovery period like for that?
So the issue I had was it was the same time as the Icelandic volcano, which had grounded all the aircraft. So to get an Aeromed, I couldn't get an Aeromed for about 4 or 5 weeks. So I was basically thrown into a hotel in Muscat with painkillers and just told to wait. That was the crucial recovery period. Finally got an Aeromed back to Celio, got back to Celio, told to go home for 6 weeks, went home for 6 weeks, came back. They'd lost all my paperwork, my MRI scans, a lot, and it was just a spiral of typical military medical issues. And so I'd missed that initial rehab period. And yeah, it took me 44 weeks before I got an operation.
Wow. Your body's recovering at this point, so it's pulling itself back together, but probably the wrong way because you've got all these injuries doing their thing. Whereas...
Yeah, that's it. It just did it all completely wrong. So, and the MOD didn't see it as that. When I left, I wasn't even paid out on the right scale. They had me one below a decent medical pension. So it took me 5 years after that, and I won a tribunal hearing against the military, and then got paid out on the correct level that I should have been, and rectified all those issues.
Oh, fair play. And I think to anyone that's listening to this who's been in that position, they should always argue their corner, because I think too many people get MD'd on and they get.
Yeah, well, someone said to me, I won't give names, someone quite high up in the industry, and they said, look, keep going for it. People don't. Apparently, the military, I'm not giving away too many secrets. The military won't even look at your case. So you appeal it. It gets refused. You can then appeal it again. It gets refused a second time. 80% of people will be like, I'm just going to give up on this. It's not until the third one that they actually open your case up. And the majority of people would have dropped off at that stage.
Yeah, just trying to get you out. Yeah,
and for me, I was that. Well, I've got nothing to lose. I'm still quite young, and I'm talking about later on for my pension. So, and that's what I did. I then the third one, they then opened up. You got a tribunal hearing, and I was supposed to be paid out, and the level that they said I was fixed within 16, 20 weeks. Well, I had evidence that my operation wasn't for 44 weeks. So I was that. So it's just putting it. And one thing I'd say to any listeners still in the military, and my doc told me to do this, get a copy of all your med docs, because it's amazing how many med docs disappear.
Yeah, funny that.
You know what I mean? So that's what I did, and I just presented everything in front of me, the tribunal hearing, and then they paid. They pay me now a monthly pension, and they backdated it as well, 6 years.
Brilliant. Oh, well done. That's the main thing. It's fight your corner. Don't let anyone mug you off. Yeah. And so I suppose before we sort of transition out of this, everyone's got a great story. Have you got a little story of a bit of dark humor or anything you can share with us?
Oof, dark humor. I'm trying to think. You caught me out there. I'll have to think on that.
No, I didn't think about that.
There's loads of dark humor. It just depends how dark it goes. No, I don't know.
I know, mate. That's the problem. We a couple of guys go on and told a few. I'm gonna have to edit that out. Like, people will not get that.
Well, that's the thing. That's one of the ethos of the special forces is humor. But I sometimes say, especially when guys and girls are transitioning, that that humor belongs in a certain environment. Don't take it into the corporate world, because they just won't get it.
You don't understand it. Yeah, a lot of guys get caught out with that, and then they don't understand. When you're out, you're out. That's it. You can't take that old mentality.
One thing I noticed as well is that a lot of, I know the military, as you touched on before, you're already thinking about your exit. So everything you learn in the military gets you into that starting point for when you leave. And there's so many, a lot of people underestimate their abilities. Well, I haven't got a degree, I haven't got this, I haven't got that. There's so many skill sets you learn. I've touched on ski instructor, dive instructor, being able to talk in a large audience. These sort of skill sets. Having a positive mindset. There's all this, but a lot of people when they get out, they'll blame, and I was guilty of this myself. Thankfully my wife's very entrepreneurial and she brought me down to the ground. I was blaming everyone else but me. I was out. Civvies, they don't understand, they're always late, blah, 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 all this lot. When in fact, there's actually nothing wrong with this community. That's normal. It's us that are unique, and we need to fit into that world. And that's where some people struggle, humor and things like that. Oh, you can't say that. As soon as you understand that, we're unique and that belongs in a certain place.
Keep it in the other room.
Yeah, keep it in the other room. But they don't need to fit in our world. We need to try and fit into their world as well.
No, that's true. So when you left, going through the book, you obviously at this point you start to have. You having a young family now? Do you have your first child around this?
Yeah, my wife was 8 months pregnant when I stepped out the camp gates. So I hadn't done any sort of resettlement because it just been rushed. So sort of natural progression, without sounding like Liam Neeson, is the private security industry. And, for me, I wanted to find a niche within the industry. We talked about some mutual friends we have, they had their maritime security companies. I didn't want to sort of be competing with that. My wife's from Aberdeen, so I moved back to Scotland. But thankfully, within 48 hours of leaving the camp gates, I got a phone call to help set up the DFID project, Department for Industry Development, which is part of the British Embassy during the Arab Spring. And I was out in Libya. Gaddafi was still in control of Tripoli. Everyone was like forming up in Benghazi. Soon identified, that the Libyans didn't want it being another Afghan in Iraq. Westerns coming in, taking over and just leaving a mess. They didn't want private security companies all walking around with weapons. So I flew home 2 weeks later. My wife gave birth to our daughter and I flew back in. And that was a big eye opener for me because normally in the military, you wouldn't be flown home. You know what I mean? I thought, oh, it's a different world. And they say they're flying you home, they're flying you home. Came back in, and a lot of these large security companies, these big, were charging six-figure sums for crisis management and evacuation plans. And actually, when you scrape the surface, there was nothing in place. So I took it upon myself there was a huge proliferation of weapons at the time in Libya. And I thought, this isn't going to be, they're not going to be here forever. So I bought 30 weapons on the black market and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt, bought comms kits, had some extra money. And I just did my own case reports, spent a month in the deserts, just writing plans from sea, from air, from road, all the potential options. And that's what I did. I then delivered my plans to some of the oil and gas sector, which they bought, and just sat on them. And that was it. So that was my niche within the industry. 2012, when the American ambassador got killed in Benghazi, they made a film 13 hours. I was there that evening. I got a phone call from a German oil company. Can I get them out of Benghazi back to Tripoli? So I did. I got them back through safe houses that I had. I had a dark corridor all the way back to Tripoli. Because of the success of that, 2 years later, I was out in Brazil covering the World Cup. So in the security sector, I also decided to work ad hoc. I didn't want to work solely for a company and do, rotations and things like that. I wanted to broaden my sort of opportunities and literally learn as much as I could about the sector. So I was on ad hoc. So one day you get a phone call, take the UAE royal family super yacht from Barcelona to Maldives. Next phone call, you're in Yemen. Next phone call, you're in Brazil covering the World Cup. So that's very much how I was operating. And I got the phone call when I was in Brazil saying that the Canadian embassy was stuck in Libya. There's now the Tripoli war. Brits, Italians, and American embassies all shut and gone, but the Canadians were stuck behind. So they rang me up and said, your name has come up, any chance you can assist? So I flew back in, sat down with the their military team. They had 18 military guys and girls and 4 diplomats. And I, single-handedly evacuated them. Me and my fixer got them safely from Tripoli to Tunis. It sounds very, sexy, sounds very Hollywood. But in fact, the success of this was understanding the demographics, the tribal influences within the country. As you know, everyone has this perception on an SF being offensive action, abseiling down the side of buildings, red dots everywhere, free falling into countries. When in fact, that's only 25% of what we do. 50% of what we do is hearts and minds, support and influence. And that's what it was here. It was just understanding the actual picture on the ground. So the Brits had got engaged at every checkpoint the week before, which was obviously worrying to the Canadians. And they're like, well, what happens to us? So myself and my fixer went out, and we didn't speak to the guys with the guns. We went up the chain to the tribal elders, and it was actually, sat down with them, shared bread and coffee. And it's just showing them respect, communicating, letting them know that we were no threat, what our intentions were. And actually then when we came in a few days later, they escorted us through. So it sounds all sexy. We did have a UAV coverage just in case, but thankfully no issues.
I mean, that's a successful mission. You extract yourself like that, and had to go noisy. But but when you sort of speak to people, they think, oh, it is all sort of sexy, bombs, bullets, whatever. People want to get into that industry, but I suppose there is the downside on sort of getting paid, and a lot of people get seen off, or there's not the right money. Companies go bust. You had that Chennai 6, whatever, those guys on the boats that got out and sent to prison. I mean, did you ever have any issues in that respect in the industry?
No, not. You do hear horror stories from it. I didn't. I actually, for the Canadian Embassy, I did it for free. I didn't charge at all, and it wasn't because it was more. When you read the book, there was a story before that where I'm with the Prime Minister of Libya, pulling in 150 guys to sort out militias, and it was soon, although it was sanctioned from above, we were soon stereotyped or tarnished with being almost like mercenaries, which we weren't. So, from then on, I really struggled getting some of the big contracts. I was getting work, but I wasn't getting the big ones, the NGOs and the oil and gas. So when it came to the Canadian Embassy, I did it for free. And everyone's like, what? You could have made a fortune. But for me, it wasn't that. It was to actually say, well, look, no, I am the number one in the industry, and we're not mercenaries, and we don't just do it for money.
Yeah, bit lost leader almost.
Yeah.
So at this point, did you decide you were going to start trying to become the fittest, craziest man in the world with the cycling exploits? Or did this come?
Yeah, well, I came back from that trip. My wife had soon highlighted I'd only been home 21 days in a whole year, in 365 days. So, the pin then dropped. I was actually trying to match the adrenaline rush I had when I was still in the Special Forces without coming to terms with the fact that I'd left. So decided to hang up my security boots. My wife's a property developer, helped her. But during this whole period of leaving the military to now, my injured leg was 2 kilos lighter than my good leg. And I'd neglected my own physical and mental well-being. I'd just been fixated on work. So I bought a push bike, off Amazon, some Batman Lycra, thinking that was cool, and it wasn't. And I just cycled to and from the office, only about 8 miles there and 8 miles back. But straight away, being physically active again, I felt a lot better. So, you can imagine with my backstory, I wasn't really interested in fucking property developing. And, I was sat there, and my missus could see that glaze over the eyes. And it was about a month before my 40th birthday. And I said, look, I've always fancied doing a world record. And that was it. So she said, what in? I said, well, cycling doesn't seem to be hampering my injury. Why not do cycling? So I knew mentally I had it. I just needed to sort of transfer that knowledge and experience I had before into cycling. So having only cycled 20 miles at this point, I applied for the world record for the world's longest road, which is 14,000 miles. So it's the equivalent of cycling it's from the southern point of Argentina to northern Alaska. But for your listeners, because of the curvature of the earth, it's equivalent to cycling from London to Sydney and then 4,000 miles. It's that far.
That's not a short journey. I was watching the TV series a while back, Long Way Up, I think, McGregor on the motorbikes, and they do from the furthest point south, wherever that is, somewhere coldest, I was up to Los Angeles, and that looked bad enough doing it on a motorbike, and they were hanging out. So doing that on a push bike and then carrying on.
And then carrying on, yeah.
Wow.
So for me, I wasn't a cyclist, but I knew like in the military are very good at planning, that intricate planning and detail, meticulous planning that's gone into it. I just did that. I just took a military set of orders, put it on the project, and just crossed out ammunition. I mean, as I evolved as a cyclist, I introduced that into the plan. But for me, it was great because, you're going into the Arctic, you're going into the desert. I've been in those environments before, but I've never done it on a bike. You know what I mean? So, and I knew mentally I was strong enough. But for, to give it that extra motivation, we also then did it for a charity which was focused on mental health, called Heads Together. So obviously Harry and his brother William and Kate were, the brains behind that. And him and I met each other on an FAC course. So he was the first person I called when I'd applied for the world record, and he said, would I do it for this campaign? So that was it. So we had the challenge and we had the campaign message. My message I was trying to promote was, it's quite relevant now with people in lockdown, is that physical activity helps your mental state. There's a lot of focus on communication, talking to people, which is good. But for me, it's just being physically active. I'm a grumpy sod unless I start training.
Get them endorphins going.
Yeah, and that was it. And that's all I was trying to promote with this is, physical activity. I'm not saying go cycle 14,000 miles. That's ludicrous. But, do that. And then also, it's never too late to start sport. I started cycling at 40. I broke my first world record at 41. So, yeah, there's also that message.
It's a hell of a message to put out there, isn't it? That if anyone that turns around and says, oh, I can't do that, or that's too hard, I'm too old. I mean, you've just dispelled that myth in one easy shot, or not so easy maybe, but anyone can achieve something. Those small goals is great for mental health. And the NHS come out of the 5 steps to mental health about, getting off the computer and Facebook and all this social media and actually talk to people, get out there and do some exercise, get outside, hit the hills, go for a run, go for a walk. And learn a new skill, all these different things, which is so easy for anyone to do. And it changes your whole mindset.
And I think you're hitting the nail on the head. People see social media, they see people and they think, oh, I can't do that. So there's a lot of them are beaten before they even set off, and that's what it is. It's almost like, people will tell you why they can't do it. And I block the outs. I'll tell you, why I can, and I get it. My sponsorship marketing team did a SWOT analysis, and the only weakness that came back was my arrogance towards the cycling community, which I just took as a strength. But it's true, you see some of these cycling clubs and they're like, they look like extras out of Star Wars with all their kit. And in fact, you strip it all down, it's just an individual. And it's almost dispelling that myth as well. These people aren't superhuman. They're just normal human beings, just kitted up.
Exactly. Well, they got all the money. I did a little ride a while back, and we were going to cycle from the south Island of New Zealand all the way to North Island. It was a couple of years ago. So we sort of went out and did that. And similar to you, I'd never really been on the bike, don't really enjoy it, and I look crap in Lycra. So I went to the local bike shop, and I said to the guy, look, I need a decent bike. I'm not very fit or reasonably fit, but I need it to be lighter. And he said, do you know what the best thing you can do for this bike to make it as light as possible would be amazing? I said, no, he goes, lose weight, you fat bastard. And so that's probably the best tip, is just lose a bit of weight. Don't go and spend $5,000 on an expensive bike. And so you do 14,000 miles. And so how do you break that down? You've got a record, you've got a break. So what was that? Yeah.
So the world record was 117 days. I was aiming for 110 days. It wasn't because I wanted to smash it by a week. When I was doing the planning on paper, you look at all the potential scenarios. I mean, look at contingencies. There is no contingency. You have to cycle it. But there was things that are out of my control, be it natural disasters, coups, things like that, a third-party influence. So I thought, well, let's aim for 110, a bit like the fudge we call in the military. So if we encounter any of those issues along the way, it's not eating into my record time, it's eating into that fudge. Yep. And so that was my target. Then, you look at, always compare it with selection. Day one of selection, you're not thinking about badging day. Yes, you are in the back of your mind, but you've got what's in front of you for that day to get over first. And that's what I did with this. I didn't look at the 14,000 miles. I broke it into countries, broke it into days. I broke the days into 4 stages. So nutrition and hydration were going to be key on this challenge. It was almost like a polar expedition. You're going to be losing weight from day one. So I needed to stay on top or my food and water. So I would just cycle as fast as I could after breakfast for 2 to 2.5 hours. And we get off the bike, 30 minutes, food and water, but then quite disciplined in my timings. It was 30 minutes and I was back on the bike. You know, I wasn't having a selfie with a llama or chatting to the documentary team. And then I would just look at the next 2 hours in front of me. I wouldn't look at the afternoon. I wouldn't look at the next day. And before you know it, you've done a day, you know, you've done a week, you've done a country, you've done a world record. So for me, mentally, I was just doing 4 FIS sessions a day. I wasn't doing a world record attempt. And that's how I managed it mentally.
And that was every day? Any days off?
Yeah, so I actually finished it in 99 days. You know, it wasn't the plan. You know, I was very fortunate I decided to go from south-north rather than north-south. And that's because I've spoken to the previous record holders and all their issues were in South and Central America. They started in Alaska and finished down. So the military man in me was like, well, why take a gamble with the second half? So I came up the other way. So I got beautiful tailwind all the way through Peru. So I took 10 days off the South America world record, did it in 48 days. I got to North America on day 70 and I was 14 days ahead. I was like, perfect. You know, I can take a day's rest if I want. My wife then rang me and, you know, my wife was a campaign director and she was very good in keeping all distractions away from me. And so I had about 5 missed calls when I got into America and I thought there was something wrong with my children. And she said, oh, we've been invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding, which just changed the dynamics completely of this challenge. So for me to get back in time, the last flight out of Prudhoe Bay. So Prudhoe Bay is in the Arctic Ocean. It's an oil field right at the top. You know, not many flights at all, but the last flight out was day 102, which was 15 days ahead of the world record. So going into that phone call, I was 14 days ahead. 10 minutes later, I'm now a day behind. So, you know, the target had changed, you know, the objective had changed. And so, you know, South America, I was cycling from first light to last light because my support team and my documentary team, a bit more risk averse than myself, they didn't want to be out at night. So we made sure last light we were in the hotel or in the RV. North America is a lot more safer. So I had the opportunity to cycle at night and that's what I did. I just made up my time through North America, cycling through the night and finding gaps in the winds as well. So I had 17 days planned for North America. And I did it 11 and a half. So I was now ahead of this new target and I got to a week outside and this professional cyclist who's already got 3 other endurance world records sponsored by Red Bull, all the big brands, had come out on social media and said that he was going to cycle the Pan American Highway in August and be the first man to do it under 100 days. I was that great. So my objective had now changed again. So I cycled for 22 hours in the last 30 hours in minus 18 to come in under that 100 days. So we did 99 days. We had 5 days off. You talked about days off. We had 3 days off due to weather and 2 days off due to logistics. But for me, I wasn't too worried because I was well ahead of my target. I always say if I'd known about the wedding or this guy from day one, mentally it might have been, you know, too much. You may have been pushing through those days off as well. But thankfully for me, I was in a position by the time I got to North America, you know, mentally, physically, you know, I was banging out the big miles.
Yeah, you can see the end at that point, I suppose. So it doesn't feel like such a drag. No,
not at all. And you know, getting into America, I don't know what the emotions getting into America, it was so high between me and the documentary. I don't know if it's because everyone spoke the language. You know, we've been on Google Translate for the last 2.5 months. You know, everyone spoke the language. The culinary options were better. But also the fact that the previous record holders had never had issues in North America and Canada. So that was almost a bit of a comfort as well. So it wasn't the original plan. You know, I always say to people, you know, the success of projects is the planning. But actually the success of this project, yes, have a plan. And it's a bit like what we have in the Special Forces. It's very expeditionary. It's being reactive to the situation in front of you. Yes, have a plan, but don't worry. Things never go to plan anyway, normally. It's just being able to react to what's in front of you. And that's what I did with this.
That's right. And did you have any issues when you're sort of South and Central America? Was there anything there that sort of held you up? Was it, or any worrying times?
No, not really at all. You know, everyone talks about Colombia. Colombians love cycling. Actually, the amount of people that came out and did that. You know, same with Mexico. We were cycling through there. There was no issues. I saw a couple of fatalities, as in other cyclists, but nothing, no real threat. You know, by the time, I always used to joke, you know, by the time someone clocked me and they'd take a double look, no, he's gone. You know what I mean? Was that a gringo on a bike? You know what I mean? A lot of people generally thought I was Chris Froome. You know, there's there's a guy, a cameraman, and you know, with this guy. But no, I didn't see it. You know, and I think, you know, my knowledge of working in the security industry, you know, I wasn't naive to it. I knew there was potential threats, but I didn't let that get in the way of what we were doing. You know, I do think people worry about other things. You know, that would be maybe one of some people's reason why they can't do it, because there's a security issue. You know, it's not. It just showing respect. And we looked at that. We looked at potential, and we came off the road at night.
That's brilliant. I mean, fantastic achievement. Well done for doing that, beating the record. Does that record still stand, or has anyone had a pop at it since?
No, yeah. So the guy did beat my world record. I did meet him, however, in Austria. He's an Austrian guy, and you know, I cycled with him and his fiance, and he did say, you know, he was under so much pressure because his sponsors, Red Bull, all these, you know, I think he's Austrian triathlon team. They said, well, you better do it, because this 41-year-old guy who's never cycled before has just smashed it on the 100-day. But, you know, what the comfort was for me, you know, records are there for people to try and break. You know, what was comforting to me is actually he watched my route and followed it exactly. He did north-south. You know, for him, he could get a vehicle all the way from top to bottom. We had to change vehicles the other way. But, you know, if I was to do it again now, there'd be different scenarios, different weathers, you know what I mean? So it was glad that it was a comfort to know that he chose my route, and, you know, but yeah, I think for him, really put him under pressure. Whereas for me, you know, I'm not a cyclist. I've enjoyed it. I've dipped my toe in it, and I'll do something else.
That's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I think that Lycra scene, you know, it's not for everyone.
My wife didn't marry me because I look like Chris Froome. That's what I always say. You know, I need to get the upper body up again.
Well, so you did it for charity. You said that you raised an astronomical amount of money for them.
Yeah, raised over 900, just short of 930 grand. We raised for them, which is amazing. That was probably the proudest moment, really, is seeing where that money was going as well. And some of that was military charities as well. So it's a broad spectrum from postnatal depression, young children, teenagers, all the way through.
And you've raised a huge amount of money. You've been in the special forces. You've just gone to smash world records. You've done a multitude of other things. And then you think, I'm not going to sit down. I'm probably a bit bored. I'm going to smash out a book. So you become an author.
Yeah, well, I didn't see, you know, I did this so I wasn't, you know, burying weapons in the middle of the desert and smuggling people across borders. I didn't see it as an opportunity in guest speaking or a book or even future challenges. It was just so I wasn't taking those risks. So we weren't really ready when we came back. We had no website. We didn't have anything like that. So yeah, but I then got introduced to a publisher, and they just loved the story. They're like, what a great story. You know, it should be a book. It's been pushed in front of a few people about maybe is it a movie? But, you know, it's one of them ones. If you didn't realize it was non-fiction, it just doesn't make sense. What, this guy's done this. Well, then he decided to, you know what I mean? So yeah, very fortunate, the book, and, you know, pleased, you know, a bit of a legacy, you know, people can hear the story. But then, you know, the first question, you know, and probably the question you asked, you know, what's next? Everyone says, what is next? And it's like, well, you know, I've cycled the world's longest road, but, you know, what's unique to me to other challengers out there, you know, I'm not a cyclist, I'm not a rock climber, you know, a mountaineer, you know, so I'll take a sport or discipline I've never really done before and find the biggest challenge. So the plan is to kayak the River Nile, which has never been done before, from source to sea. That's the next challenge. You know, I've spent a bit of time in a klepper, you know, on my boat course, just to show you how annoying and frustrating it is, but never done it sport-wise.
Well, at least the sports ones will be a bit lighter than those kleppers. They're not the greatest to be paddling around in.
Exactly, yeah. But it has its own issues, and, you know, got the crocs, the hippos, the civil war in South Sudan. You know, it's going to be a great challenge. And unlike the other challenge, there is no target. No one's ever done it before. So you know,
you're setting records.
Setting records yourself, yeah.
Yeah, and you've got crocs and hippos to look after. I mean, hippo, what is that? The most dangerous animal in Africa?
Yeah, but I always say don't get in between the mother and the baby. That's all. Is that? Well, how do you know which one the mother and baby is when you're just seeing ears sticking out of the water? So, but for me on that challenge, that's where again that local intelligence, local fishermen, they'll know where they tend to bathe and lay up.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Use local intelligence. Use the guys that are on the ground there. They know the stuff. They know where to tell you, where to lead you, or tell you not to go. Exactly. So going back, so your book Relentless, it's coming out next month in the States. It's available in the UK now on. I bought it this weekend on Amazon. There's a hardback and a soft copy. I bought the soft one because it's cheaper, but the hardback one would look better on the bookshelf. I read it over the weekend. Great read. Really enjoyed it. And it's actually one of the first podcasts I've prepared for. And I really enjoyed it. I'm actually going to properly read it again and then take it all on board rather than trying to smash it out in 24 hours. You said you might have a film or there was talk about it. So we don't know if that's going to happen, but for the vanity side of it, who would play you if you had to choose?
I don't know. I think Jason Statham needed to go in the gym if he wanted to sort of play me. It'd have to be some sort of golden individual, yeah.
He's quite short, only Jason Statham.
Yeah, Vin Diesel needed to go and start pumping up some weights. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe not Brad Pitt. Too old these days. So you're in the States. Is there anywhere you're trying to sort of push the book out there? Is there a particular target?
So we came out here, obviously the Nile was the next project. The wheels paused because of COVID. So, we like to keep pushing forward. We just saw an opportunity to come over now, get set up. One of the feedbacks from the book is you are one of the security experts in the wheels. So why are you still not in the industry? So I'll be doing both. The book's going to be launched here in USA and Canada. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, all the big areas. Got a few big podcasts coming up, a few big media, PR coming to promote that book. And then obviously focus on the Nile Challenge as well. The guest speaking, that's all still going. And obviously there's a couple other media projects I can't really allude to at the moment. But in the background, very much, working with some of the big ultra high net worth families, just keeping an eye on them, protecting them during these times. So juggling a few things at the moment. But for me, it was the key one was that yin and yang, that balance between work and lifestyle. My daughter's 9 and my son's 4. So they're at a good age that we could come over now and get themselves set up. So, yeah.
What a great place to grow up.
Yeah. Oh, there's worse places. Yeah.
Moss Side. Shot. They got America. Not bad. Disney for the weekend kids.
Yeah. No. Yeah. But Disneyland's only 15 minutes away. It's just shut. That's all.
Oh, shame, bloody COVID, eh? And so as we'll finish off, it's obviously been great having you on the show. Really enjoyed listening to your journey. If people want to listen more, where can they go and find out about Dean Stott?
Yeah, so just designed a new website. Actually, it's www.deanstott.com. Obviously, a lot of stuff will be updated on there as and when. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter at Dean Stott SBS.
Fantastic. And obviously, you mentioned a documentary. Is that something that people can watch on your ride?
Yeah, so we're just we've got all the footage now from the documentary. It was one of them ones. It was almost like, well, what was the story you're trying to tell? So now it's marinated a bit, and there's a little bit more we can add to the story. Since obviously finishing, then we'll look at pushing that out. We're in a great position at the moment in the fact that broadcasters are short of material, and we've now got some material for them. So we're just looking at that now. How that will align with the book launch here, and then with the Nile as well.
Great stuff. And best of luck with all of that. I think watching that documentary is great. There's obviously going to be a part 2 with the Nile and how to avoid the hippos. And that's not a nightclub for the blokes out there listening. And, and hopefully there'll be sort of like stage 3, stage 4, and plenty of other challenges. You're young, you've got the time in your hands.
Yeah. Yeah. See what's next after that. Always have to have a purpose or something to aim for anyway.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate your time coming on today onto Another Man's Shoes. It's been great listening to your journey. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. No, appreciate it.
Cool. That's it, bud.
Excellent.
No, I enjoyed that. That's great. I'll whack out all the links and all the usual sort of stuff. Get that out there. I got.
No. Good luck with the shows. No, not just saying it to you here, but that's one of the better interviews just off the cuff. I normally get the same sort of questions. So no, it was good. It's good to focus more on the military as well, because I tend to depends who you go with. Some people want to hear about the bike ride.